Cascade by Rosen, Chapter 1. On a blistering September morning, 4 months before Magic tore the country a brand new asshole, Tobias Fletcher stood in front of his wife, a dizzying array of choices before him, all of them wrong. It wasn't idle nerves. Tobias had shot for AP in Aleppo, where the click of a shutter separated a clear, placid day from a maelstrom of bone and rebar. It was about preparation. Whether a combatant or not, you wore a flak vest in a war zone. Tobias was about to ride into battle against Ian Mallory, the federal government's resident wizard, and he needed the right armor, or some means of disarmament. Tobias was a jocular golden retriever of a man, slow to anger and quick to forgive. He prided himself in moderation in all things. He ate sensibly, watched his salt, and cycled to work. He did not bring up politics unprompted. When asked by new acquaintances, he described himself as socially liberal, fiscally conservative, and switched the topic to hockey. He did not speak of magic. It didn't touch his life, except in this one particular way. He was, in short, an unlikely man to provoke a revolution. But the gentlemen's agreements that held civilization together only worked when everyone agreed to be gentlemen. And when they didn't, it became the duty of gentlemen to get a little uncivilized. Lucy, his wife, was a perfectionist who understood the impact of a flourish. She'd unearthed a pile of ties from the walk-in closet that Tobias had set up as a darkroom, now colonized by wardrobe overflow when they'd moved to Ottawa. She held 4 ties between her fingers, and he squinted at them. The blue felt partisan, the red, politically confusing under the present mercurial landscape. The green works best with your complexion, Lucy insisted. Tobias considered whether it would look garish against his charcoal suit. The gray will bring out his eyes, not yours. Should he even wear a tie? Dress had taken a turn for the disheveled up on the hill since the cocaine socialists had taken over. But that was really the problem, wasn't it? The rabble wasn't just at the gates. It had invaded the palace, smashed the Qing vases, demanded and received the heads of the aristocracy, and was figuratively, if not literally, shitting on the tables. And at the center of it all, Prime Minister Patrice Abel slouched on the throne with his stolen golden crown, drunk at the feast with Mallory, his shriveled, skulking vizier at his side. The election might be called any day now. When it was, the Post's editorial board had been quite clear about its desire to see Canada's 3-year experiment with magical governance end. Tobias was there to observe, to document, not to editorialize. If his camera happened to catch Mallory leading a cabinet minister around like the Pied Piper or performing telekinesis on the press gallery, so much the better. Tobias reached for the green one, holding it up to his collar in the mirror. I didn't even know I owned so many ties, he admitted. She tilted her head to one side. It's Cynthia's profile, not yours. He won't even be looking at you, let alone making you cluck like a chicken. That was the worst thing he'd done. I'd forgive him. Tobias looped the tie into a Windsor knot. This is about democracy. It's one thing when 2 gangs of bastards murder each other with regular weapons like normal people. It's quite another when the enemy is hexing the opposition and all their descendants. This isn't supposed to happen in Canada. Anyone who thinks that democracy and a tiny minority of wizards can coexist is a fool. I think they prefer MIA. Like so much else, terminology was a lost cause. Magic had returned to the world too late, long after mass media had developed a vocabulary for it. That vocabulary sat uneasily with a gravitas of serious politics. Magic-affected individual was about as anodyne and euphemistic as it got. That was editorial's problem, not Tobias's. You're right about the green, Tobias said. He checked his armory again, gauged power levels and cable connections. The padding in his messenger bag was more than adequate for his Nikon D7000 and the microdrone nestled in its tiny foam casing. I might just be the photographer, but if I can play a role in ending Ian Mallory's reign of terror, I will. He expected her dulcet laugh in response. Instead, Lucy straightened his tie. She watched him with the same seriousness as she had 2 decades ago, when she'd been an ambitious young music student at McGill, during the heady days when the Cascade's magic had remade the world. Great, she said. Now go do it. The Septembers of Tobias's childhood were bright and crisp, carrying in them the cool premonition of autumn. But that was before. Now the grass had baked to parched yellow and brown. The official end of summer was marked only by the return to Parliament Hill and the retreat of school children to the century-old brick fortresses that kept the public safe from them. Even at a leisurely roll through residential streets, a thick sheen of sweat settled over his skin. The Post's Ottawa correspondent, Cynthia Tan, was meeting him at Laurier Avenue West, in front of the office that housed Mallory and his staff. No one had been exactly sure where to put the consultancy department that insiders called the broom closet. Public safety had, ominously enough, seemed the best fit. Cynthia emerged flustered from a cab, 6 months pregnant, smoothing her hair back into place, only 5 minutes late. She was a good choice for the Ottawa desk, photogenic, soft-spoken, and non-threatening enough to catch her subjects with their guard down. And courtesy of parents who'd fled Hong Kong just before reunification, she was possessed of an allergy to anything that carried the faintest whiff of socialism. "You ready to nail this guy?" she asked, already walking briskly ahead of him despite her shorter strides. Tobias shifted the camera bag at his side and nodded. "Cool, I'm looking forward to this. It'll be like the time Jordan trapped Titania with the salt circle and got her to spill the name of the last guardian." He blinked. "Like what?" "I always forget you're the one person in the world who doesn't watch Night Beats. You really should take in some fiction made in the last millennium, Tobias." Always chivalrous. He swallowed the dig at his pop cultural savvy, held the door open for her. Outside Mallory's third-floor cement cell, the reception desk was staffed by an intern with a coffee stain on her sleeve. The downward hunch of her shoulders told him that she'd noticed and lived too far away to run home and change. He smiled sympathetically, but she didn't look up from her computer screen. Tobias peered past her desk. There was another, short corridor, and then the office itself, the door ajar just enough to be an invitation. A cursory look at the desk revealed that the girl hadn't been and wouldn't be there long enough to accumulate many personal items. There was a printout that might have been a locket around a woman's neck, and a strange, dilapidated lineup of rubber stress toys. They were grubby, as if someone had given them to her as an office-warming present, and unpredictably, they'd proved more useful than expected. If she hadn't been on the enemy's side, he would have felt just a little bad for her. "You're from the Post," the girl said. She adjusted her thick black glasses over the bridge of her nose. Mallory's empire was built on the ashen corpses of eager-to-please young women. "He's expecting you. Go right in." "You sure?" The girl might be as corrupt an ideologue as her boss, but she was just as likely punching a clock or trying to complete university co-op hours. Not beyond redemption. Empathy was the better tactic. "From what I hear, he's a bit..." The gesture was supposed to be teeth and claws. Or something. "Prickly." The girl reached for a well-used fidget spinner that lit up with a flick of her wrist. She said, "Don't know where you'd get that impression. Go on in before he turns you both into toads." Tobias rapped his knuckles on the door jamb, just in case. There was no sweat on Mallory. For all Tobias knew, he came to work in an armored car, flanked by flunkies with old-fashioned handkerchiefs. Maybe wizards didn't sweat at all. Had found some supernatural means to avoid the myriad liquid humiliations of mortal flesh. Mallory wore a suit, and yes, a tie, gray, as Lucy had predicted. He leaned backwards from his desk in a tall leather chair, waving them both inside. The teenage Tolkien aficionado in Tobias whined in disappointment that Mallory hadn't actually opted for a wizard staff and robes. He supposed that would have been a little too much to ask. Lanky and ragged, with hair the color of rust shot through with gray at the temples, there was nothing overly mystical about the man. Tobias's own personal Saruman was fraying around the edges, and for all his legend was just another bureaucratic drone in a swiftly bloating state apparatus. Last election, when a conflux of economic catastrophe, personal scandal, and Tobias could only assume magic dark as Vantablack had swept the party to power, Mallory had been all charm. But he'd aged decades in the years that had followed. Tobias turned the right way. He saw something more than physical weariness. Desiccated gray flesh, clinging to bone, a grim, taut-lipped death's head. Izzy, his microdrone, wouldn't capture that Dorian-grade degeneracy. It was just too new to react properly to magic. The older generation DSLR might, if he got lucky. Ah, good. The legacy press has arrived. Ian Mallory announced, barely looking up. Even the craggy stone of his Newfoundland accent, exaggerated and parodied in countless editorial cartoons and comedy sketches, had eroded into a muddy, undifferentiated Toronto grumble from his years of living there. Cynthia Tan. She put out a hand, but she shook, bemused. This is my photographer, Tobias. It took more than Mallory's crushing grip to throw him off his game. He waited for the feeling to return to his fingers and set up his gear while Cynthia attempted rapport. Do you prefer magic-affected individual or... Patrice calls me his court sorcerer, Mallory said. My preferred term is charmer, if it matters to you. Small mountains of crumpled paper littered his desk, marked with intricate labyrinthian designs. Tobias caught one and unfolded it. What he'd taken for black pen, maybe graphite, was a series of precisely etched scorch marks. Cynthia, serene, took a seat across from Mallory. Tobias framed the shot, letting Cynthia's questions drift into the background. The lens kept going out of focus. The edges of Mallory's thin lips curved upwards in something less a smile than a wolf's snarl. Was he flirting with her? Stranger things had happened, though. If that were the case, he was barking up the wrong tree. Anyway, I never refuse a good character assassination. How's old Reed Curtis these days? Still ruling the newsroom with an iron fist? You've stated in the past that you see the country on the precipice of crisis, environmental, social, economic, and that magic is the solution. Would you say that the party is any closer to solving these problems? I'll get the obvious joke out of the way first. My vision of this country's political future is so preposterous that it takes magic to make it work in practice. Fortunately for all of us, Mallory's fingers sparked white where they tinted. One stray ember burnt a moment on the polished mahogany of his desk before fizzling out. Tobias abruptly remembered that while Ian Mallory might be a cog in a machine, a cog could still grind you underneath it. I happen to be a fucking magician.
Thank you for watching this reading. Find more indie author reading library performances on our YouTube channel, along with our Meet the Author interviews and recordings of previous panels. Hit subscribe to get notifications for every new video. Find us at glasgow2024.org and as Glasgow in 2024 on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Check out our cool merch on redbubble.com/people/Glasgow2024/shop and consider joining by emailing volunteers at glasgow2024.org.